So Gartner estimated within a few short years, 25% of CIOs are going to be remunerated according to their decarbonisation efforts. I think Gartner are being conservative. I'm here to tell you about how you as CIOs and IT leaders have a critical role to play in your organization's sustainability efforts, or what I call digital-led sustainability. So we'll start with some numbers. There's two numbers up there, 350 parts per million, 420 parts per million. One number represents the scientific consensus on the tipping point past which we have reached a tipping point in climate change. And the other represents where we are currently. Would you like to guess which is which? $350 is the safe limit, 422.49 as of the weekend. So I suppose we can wrap it up there. Just go home and kiss your kids goodbye. That's it. No, we're not going to be defeatist on this. As a wise man said, in a dark place we find ourselves. But I'm here to sort of bring a little bit of light to that. So, the UN Secretary General, he said it very well last year. Our world needs climate action on all fronts, everything, everywhere, all at once, and we need to do it at warp speed. Some of you, many of you may be familiar with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, launched in 2015, a set of 17 global goals for environmental and social sustainability. The frightening thing is we're actually closer to 2030 than we are to 2015, and we're actually not looking so great in terms of achieving them. But we do have some good news. So the first good news is the renewable energy transition. I spent 13 years in renewables, and at the beginning I remember our heroic public affairs representatives going out and meeting government representatives around the world and trying to convince them to start a renewables program, arguing the total cost of ownership, the decarbonisation efforts. Now the environmental thing to do is also the economical thing to do. Maybe a show of hands, who has already installed solar PV on their homes? A handful. For the others I'd ask, what are you waiting for? The return on investment is very fast. On commercial installations, even more so. We have one where their return on investment was effectively 2 years, so the payback period was 2 years, and after that they're essentially making a profit. So a great stat here for you to quote as well is, have a look at what China has done. In 2023 they installed 238 gigawatts of renewable energy. It took the US 40 years to do that. So anybody who uses the phrase "but China," just quote that stat. China is actually really taking the lead on this. It's the reason that solar has become so affordable, and that we have such a short payback period on solar. It's quite phenomenal. So that's a real positive. We have reached a positive tipping point in that regard. In that the environmental thing to do is now the economical thing to do. Here's another positive in terms of, let's start talking about how is technology helping with sustainability. At COP26, Al Gore launched climatetrace.org, and it's using satellite data and AI to track emissions globally. And the great thing that this is doing is that it is shining a light on emissions worldwide, and it essentially is an independent truth of what's actually happening. So who would you trust in terms of emissions? Independent tracking of actual data, or the fossil fuel companies or oil producing states? So this has been a phenomenal weapon in the arsenal to get countries talking at subsequent COPs to agree what needs to be done and what the facts actually are. Now we take it down to some other sort of uses of technology that are helping with sustainability. Here in Ireland, data centres, which get a bad rap sometimes, there seems to be a bit of a hit job in the press a lot for data centres. But one thing you should know is something that Microsoft have pioneered here, and should eventually become something that gets rolled out far further, is that you'll be familiar with data centers having a large bank of uninterruptible power supply. So Microsoft will charge up at night time with the plentiful renewables that are available, and at peak times when renewables are maxed out, it's releasing back energy from those batteries back into the grid, so it's further displacing fossil fuels. Now that's a sign of being a good corporate citizen. Here's another Irish success story, Energy Cloud. What they do is they're doing something opposite. They're availing of renewable energy that would otherwise be wasted, where they would have to curtail it, and they are making it available to energy poor households. They've installed devices there that will be triggered and will heat up their hot water tanks. So this is it's a social enterprise. Another one, in terms of minimizing food waste and addressing food poverty as well, is instead of things going to landfill, these things being made available to people to get either for free or very cheaply. So a great use of technology. And here's some more good news, which probably, if anybody has had to deal with this, would probably say it's not such good news for them because it's going to bring a lot of work, is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. So what this does is it really sets a new standard for sustainability reporting, and it's a very impressive piece of legislation from the EU. So one of the key points here is that any sustainability claims made by organisations is going to have to be independently verified. So that's something we're going to need technology and a system of record for it. But beyond that, what is really important is it covers the entire scope of an organisation's carbon emissions. So for many years now, companies, they reported on their direct emissions scope 1 and 2, and they'll have to report on their supply chain emissions. So these larger organisations that have to report to CSRD will be asking smaller organisations, say, report to us what your carbon footprint is. We're seeing that even beyond the EU. In the UK, the NHS requires all of its suppliers to now sort of submit a verified carbon footprint, and that's just something that's going to accelerate. We're seeing this already having an effect. We saw that Microsoft have now announced to their major suppliers they need to switch to 100% renewable electricity. So you're seeing these large organisations are going to influence smaller organisations to actually start improving their sustainability standing in order to still get business from them. So where do you guys come in? So I wanted to share with you first, what are some of the challenges that the Chief Sustainability Officer has in their organisation, where an organisation has a Chief Sustainability Officer, or if it's not with them, it's going to sit with the CEO. So having spoken with them over the last number of years, the first thing they said to me was, we don't know where we're at. They were struggling with Excel sheets. They tended to rush to get things done by the end of the year, and then they said, I wish we'd known that earlier, we could have acted upon it. So access to near real-time information, to be able to monitor and improve the performance of the organisation in terms of sustainability. They also will have data gaps, and this is something that the horror scenario that could come for some organisations is if they leave the CIOs out of the room and they come to you sort of 4 weeks before they need to submit their first CSRD report, and they'll find out that you said, well, you should have asked me this just over a year ago because it's actually last year's data that we need to capture. So you have gaps there. Another big challenge is going to be prioritising initiatives. You can't do everything at once. There's big challenges in terms of changing the business model of an organisation. There's things that you want to do, things that you need to get the C-suite aligned to. They need to, they need to agree to it. Certainly a 4-day week might be the sort of thing that a sustainability officer might push for in terms of the reducing commute. So they may be pushing for full remote working. But the CEO may not agree to that. So those challenges of agreeing what those initiatives are. Another one is just educating everybody in the workforce about sustainable practices. So these are all challenges that our Chief Sustainability Officer has. And the reason I put them up is because you will probably recognise many of those as challenges that the CIO has already been dealing with for years. Transforming an organisation, getting buy-in from the C-suite, data strategy, data gaps, getting the dashboards and performance dashboards up there. We also have our challenges with legislation, you know, the rush with GDPR, in terms of trying to do all of this. So there is a really close alignment to what the needs of the Chief Sustainability Officer are and the skill sets of the Chief Information Officer. So I was looking, I did an online search to say what is the most iconic duo from movies or TV, and the one that came back as number one, I think is quite appropriate, is these two, right? Chewbacca and Han Solo. I won't say which is the CSO and which is the CIO, but if you look at it, they are from very different backgrounds, but they have a great rapport, they understand each other's languages, and they understand each other's background, and they are as tight as this. So I see that the future is in organizations that have a CSO, that the CIO is essentially their closest ally and somebody who can really help them achieve their goals. And in smaller organizations that won't have a CSO, that may become an extension of the CIO's remit because you have all the skills to deliver on it. So, so what I wanted to tell you about in terms of if you're having that conversation with the CSO or indeed with the CEO about why this should be the CIO's remit, there's a good way to get what you want. You know, first of all, tell people what you've already done for them. Then they're starting to listen. Then you tell them about a few quick wins that you can deliver. Then they're paying attention to what can you deliver on them. And once you've done that, then you can come to them with the full program and tell you this is what we really need to do. So these are some quick takeaways for you. These are things that you've already done as CIOs that have contributed to sustainability outcomes. You know, the pandemic forced us all to do it. We may have been lucky enough to be ready, or we may have had to do them. So we had to move to remote working. So we have facilitated that in terms of setting up the systems that allowed us to do that and cut out all of those commutes. We've reduced down what's called the Scope 3 employee commutes and business travel. And you know, many of us now are working remotely or hybrid. It has become a norm. So it's a continuing contribution to the reduction of emissions. Another thing, we weren't allowed to go to each other's houses. We couldn't go around getting signatures, so there was a massive uptake in terms of electronic document signing. And sometimes we think of that as just the paper, but there's a stat there from DocuSign says about how many millions it's an American company, so they talk in terms of gallons and pounds of water and of waste that have been avoided. So that's another thing that you've all implemented. And another one that became exponential is we embraced the cloud. We realized that if we had a locked-in system behind a firewall that was sitting there in the office that was only accessible from the office, it's not really that useful when we're not able to go into the office. So we saw more adoption of the cloud. And although there's all of these stories about data centers and their energy usage, the thing is we have to see is that the big tech companies are the largest procurers of renewable energy. You know, they are the top four procurers. So Microsoft have made a great commitment to net zero by 2030 across all three scopes of emissions, and they want to remove all their historical emissions by 2050. Google have been for at least 4 years, if there's somebody from Google that correct me, maybe 5 now, where they have matched by the hour their renewable energy purchases to their electricity usage. So embracing the cloud means you're partnering with organizations who are taking this very, very seriously. So those are things that you have already done. So that's the first thing you say. Already done this for you. Then you give them a few quick wins. So a simple one, you know, and there's a great website called the Carbon Literacy Project. Have a look at it. It talks about simple everyday things and their carbon footprint. And emails, and particularly when you scale it up in an organization, have quite a considerable carbon footprint. So in terms of a program to reduce down, particularly internally, the use of emails and using things like Teams chat instead to make sure you're sharing links, not attachments, is stopping it from replicating into multiple inboxes that it's going to sit and just have it in one place. So there's organizations who have said we are stopping all internal emails and we're only using Teams. So that's a great thing to be doing. A very simple one. There's a search engine browser search engine called Ecosia. It's been around for years. Many people don't even know about it. Their whole raison d'etre is they use all their revenues to plant trees. So, as the CEO had said, if everyone used us instead of Google, we could have planted 300 billion trees. So a very simple change to make. And another one is in terms of where do you host your website? Does it use 100% clean energy? Does it do carbon offsets? If they're not advertising it, they probably don't. So those are some simple ones. And then we get on to the big picture. This is what we want to really talk about. Once we have them listening and they're saying, yes, we recognize you've done these and you've done these quick wins, how do we accelerate the sustainability journey of our organization and how do we use technology to do it? So there are 5 main pillars for this. The first is a strategy, although you could decide you want to start with education. But the strategy, these are not short-term things. This is not for the year. This is a goal to 2025 or a goal to 2030 or beyond. So it's a long-term play. You will have data gaps that you're going to have to identify and close. You need to baseline. You need to benchmark against industry. See how are you performing against others. And you need to prioritize. On education, you need to build champions for sustainability within the organization, and you need to make sure that you're getting all the best ideas. One of the great things about doing a sustainability implementation is there's usually a lot of goodwill there. People want to sort of offer up their ideas. A big one as well is data automation. You'll have a lot of data that needs to be captured. We've seen companies that have implemented carbon management first and realize there's a lot of data entry in there. But the good carbon management systems, they come with APIs and they come with connectors, IoT connectors. So combining the two. When it comes to carbon management, by 2030 we'll see this is going to be as ubiquitous as ERP is today. It's either going to be a standalone system that is very much sort of accelerating that transition, or we'll see the ERP vendors will be incorporating that functionality themselves. And then beyond that, something's going to become more and more important is getting certified. So you'll see it if you have to deal with any tenders, you're going to see it has moved long beyond them saying, have you got a sustainability plan tick? They're asking detailed questions now. They're asking, do you have external certifications? So those are the big challenges in terms of sustainable transformation. How does technology play into this? Well, I just want to introduce you to our Rebel Alliance, which are these technologies here. So the first one there, Digitopia, was set up by a couple of former Gartner executives, and it's essentially about democratizing that whole consulting space in terms of driving sustainability, maturity, and digital maturity. So it's like the Millennium Falcon. The Institute of Sustainability Studies, these are all SAS 2.0 technologies. Myself and Ben are faculty members there. It's essentially online diploma. It's something that you can identify and have your sustainability leaders, and that could be the CIO taking that role, is learning about everything related to the sustainability journey. In terms of automation IoT, the one in the middle there is called Cognition World, and then our carbon management system is Carbon Fit, which is, as I said, is going to be carbon management system is going to be very, very ubiquitous over the next number of years. And then EcoVadis is the leading independent ESG ratings provider that any company, whether listed or not, can utilize. So that is essentially the Rebel Alliance. So my call to action for you is the following. Right? As a CIO, you possess many of the skills that the CSO is going to need to either harness, or if you do not have a CSO, this could well be something that you expand your remit into. You need to work together. Don't wait to be asked a month before they need to do their report for CSRD, that all of a sudden you realise you don't have 12 months of data. This is something where you need to be right in the heart of this. To accelerate the journey, get away from Excel sheets, offer up the technologies and tell them, look, we can automate this. We can provide a system of record. We can do all of these things faster and better with technology. And the last one I'd say is to collaborate. Sustainability is different from the other parts of our business model that we want to keep sort of secret. If you're doing something well, share it, and tell others about it, because we all benefit from a reduction in those parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere. So we should all be sharing best practices. Get independent advice. The other thing I'd say, which we haven't mentioned, is there are many government grants available. Whether you're an Enterprise Ireland customer, whether you're a local enterprise office, you can talk to them. There are a lot of green grants available, a lot of digital grants. You can combine the two and you can achieve a lot with sustainability. So 5 years ago, I used to talk about sustainable digital transformation. When I'd speak to an audience like this, I'd ask them to consider sustainability in their digital transformation. Now my message is slightly different. I say I'd like you to embed yourselves in the sustainable transformation of your organization. So I wish you best of luck and may the force be with you.
Yeah, we just talked about both faculty members on
Thanks, sir. That was Mark. Lots of Star Wars references, so yeah, obviously we know that.